Hi, this is Dr. Betsy Greenleaf, and we're back with another episode of Body, Mind, Spirit. I'm very excited because on today's show, we have Dr. Elia Gourgouris, the happiness doctor. He is the author of The 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness that's been translated into 5 different languages. He's been a keynote speaker all over the world. He's a founder of the Happiness Center, an organization of world-leading experts in the field of positive psychology. And specifically, we're going to be talking to him about his new book, which is The 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis. So thank you, Dr. Elia, for being with us today.
Dr. Betsy, it's my pleasure. Let's spread some happiness and wellness.
So how did you get into happiness as a field?
Okay, so this is a funny story because I speak all over the world and people say, "How did you become a happiness expert?" The answer to this is this journey to happiness began on the very first day I was born. This is a true story. I'm not messing around. So I was born a long time ago in Athens, Greece, like back in the day before Instagram Live and Facebook Live and all that stuff. So, just my mom and the obstetrician, right? So as the story was told with me growing up, my dad shows up to the hospital, kind of a tough Greek guy, whiskey, smoking cigarette, and he comes up to this little window where I was wrapped up in this white generic blanket along with 4 other babies. We're all wrapped up in the same. And he asks the nurse, he goes, "Which one's my son?" And I guess at that moment I had a smile on my face. So the nurse turns to my dad and goes, "Your son, he's the happy one." And I was branded the happy one. Like that's the story I was told growing up. Now, fast forward 25 years, now I'm in graduate school getting my PhD in psychology, and our professor is talking to us about nature versus nurture. In other words, is it our genetic predisposition or our environment? Clearly, both contribute to who we are and how we become the way we are. And I had this terrible thought. I'm like, wait a minute, what if my dad gets stuck in traffic, shows up 15 minutes late, comes up to the same little window, asks the same nurse the same question, and at that point, I'm screaming my head off because I have like stomach pains. And the nurse turns to my dad and says, "Your son, he's the cranky one." And then the story that I'm told growing up is like, "Well, you came out of the womb cranky, you miserable little beep." Now, so the point is that we've all been branded in our lives, and some brands are positive brands. For obviously, the happiness, be happy is a great brand to have, and I've embraced it and lived it my entire life. But there are other ones: the cute one, the adorable one, the loving one, the kind one, the princess. I mean, the athletic, and so on. However, in having worked primarily with women as in my first part of my career as a clinical psychologist, I can tell you that far too many people have had very negative brands, like devastatingly negative brands. I won't go into all of them, but I will tell you the 3 most common ones. And you might say, seriously, who would say that to their kid? Believe me, the top 3 negative brands are the fat one, the ugly one, and the stupid one. These are powerful words. So fast forward, my number 1 best-selling book comes out. I start doing a tour all over the United States, and I end up in North Carolina in a women's conference, 500 women and me. And I'm sharing this story, what I just told you about. And I implored the audience. I said, look, if you don't like your brand, if you have a negative brand in your life, today's the day to change your brand. Like empower yourself, like make a decision and rewrite the story in essence. Well, out of the corner of my eye, this older lady who's in her 70s gets up and starts waving her arms. And it's like literally distracting. I can't ignore her because everybody's looking at her. And she kind of threw me off. I'm in my zone. I'm doing my thing, right? So I stopped and I'm like, "Yes, ma'am." She goes, "Dr. Elia, after listening to you, I want to change my brand. For 70 years, I have been called fat, ugly, and stupid, and then a couple of cuss words." And Dr. Betsy, the crowd, I mean, silence. You could hear a pin drop. I think we were all stunned. Like between you and I don't know if I would be that vulnerable to share that in front of 500 people. But anyway, I kind of recovered quickly, and I'm like, "Well, ma'am, well, what would you like your brand to be now?" And by the way, her name was Leah. Leah. She goes, "Well, from now on, I want to be known as Princess Leah." And I'm like, "Yes, Your Majesty." And I bowed down to her, and everybody cracked up. I mean, this very tense moment became this very lighthearted moment, and everybody laughed. It was like, and then I went on with my talk. Why do I share this story? Because if a woman in her 70s has the power to change a brand that she's been burdened with for 70 years, then anybody else can do it. So for your audience, I want to ask them to really seriously think about what has been your brand growing up. If you have a positive brand, count your blessings. That's great. But if you don't, do not procrastinate your happiness. Change your brand today.
And that is such a powerful story, especially, with this woman in her 70s and living her whole life under this brand that just didn't fit her. And I connect this with, we talk a lot in the show about body, mind, spirit. And as a doctor, I can treat the body, but if you've been branded by someone else or you branded yourself a certain way, that can create such an emotional toll that can have long-term effects on your bodily health.
Your
So,
body health, also your mental health, because what that create inside of you, obviously low self-esteem, depression, um, even self-hate. I know that's a strong, powerful term, but basically you begin to have self-defeating thoughts, which, as you know, leads to self-destructive behaviors. And I work with a lot of addiction. So, my dissertation was on Alcoholics Anonymous. So I know addictions inside and out. Every single one of them that I treated had low self-esteem and loathing. I mean, really loathing. So we had to recalibrate, and so they could begin to see themselves with a new brand, a more positive brand. And that had a direct impact on their sobriety or losing their sobriety. For those that embrace their new brand, man, their life took off. And for those that kind of struggle, they could, one of my gifts, and I believe that it comes from God because I don't know how it happens. I can see people's potential before they see it in themselves. Like I can see the beauty, the greatness in another human being. And my part of my job has always been to have them see it themselves, because ultimately me seeing it is not enough. They have to not only see it, but believe it and then live it.
now we're dealing with coronavirus and this pandemic, which is something none of us, a year ago would have been thinking that this would ever be part of our lives. And you came out with this new book, The 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis. And it's not just about coronavirus, but it's any crisis. So, where do we start? Because for some people, it's just so easy to become kind of like panicked and go into this like fight or flight stage and just be like, I'm going to freeze and just, or give up. So,
I mean, you're totally right. The world is facing a plethora of challenges right now. It isn't just the pandemic. I mean, that's one. Number two is the mental health crisis, where according to the United Nations, over 1 billion people, that's with a B, suffer from depression, anxiety, and stress. Mind you, these are people that did not have a pre-existing condition. This is really important. And between you and I think those numbers are way underreported. There's no way only 1 out of 7 people is suffering from depression, anxiety, and stress. I think we all are. So
yes.
that's crisis number two. Then you throw in the economic and financial crisis with tens of millions of people unemployed just here in the United States, but hundreds of millions across the world, and billions either underemployed or just feeling financially insecure. Like, how am I going to take care of my family, my kids, myself, right? And then you throw in the political, social, and racial strife. So we have four global crises simultaneously. I'm not even talking about people's personal crises, like going through a divorce or a separation or having to take care of an elderly parent that has Alzheimer's or a child that's sick. We're not even counting those. So human beings are pretty resilient. We can handle one or two crises at the same time. We've done it before. We can't handle four, five, or six. And this is why you're seeing what you're seeing. So in March, I had this truly inspiration because I try to stay connected to the spirit. That said, Elia, you need to get a book out on the pandemic, and you need to get out in 45 days because people are going to need
Wow.
it. There's going to be a tsunami of mental health issues coming up. Wow, indeed, because my first book, my happiness book, took 3 years to write. So just to be, but March 15th, is a seminal date. Beware the Ides of March, like it says Julius Caesar in Shakespeare, right? So I picked up the phone and I called my best friend, partner, writing partner, and I said, Coach Khan, that's his name. I'm going to start writing a book tomorrow. We got to get out in 45 days. Are you in or are you out? And he said, I'm in. And for 45 days, we did nothing else, like morning, noon, and night. And we got it out in May. And, the rest is kind of history in essence. So back to what you said, how do people handle challenges or crisis? There are four personality types. The number one, we call the victim. And the victim, of course, is, why is this happening to me? Like, poor me, right? And they get down and depressed and so on, as if it's only happening to them and not 7 billion people. So that's the victim, number one. Number two, we call the critic. Now, the critic, regardless of what the federal, state, or local government, the UN, or World Health Organization says, they criticize everything. For example, Dr. Elia, you should wear a mask when you go outside. Well, that's stupid. Okay, Dr. Elia, never wear a mask when you go outside. What are you trying to do? Kill me? Like, no matter what you say, they're like, then we get to the one that you brought up. Actually, you didn't even know it, but that's the third personality type, which we like to call the bystander. Now, mind you, a good person, but so overwhelmed by the changes taking place, they're frozen in fear. They do nothing. They don't know what to do. They might look to their neighbor, look to the left, look to the right, but really they don't know what to do, so they do nothing. And what all three of these personality types have in common is this: they don't move the needle forward, they don't offer a solution, they're just paralyzed and frozen by fear. They do nothing in essence. Now comes the fourth type, which we like to call the navigator, which was all obviously the premise of the book. And the navigator, of course, starts with practicing self-care and is kind to other people, has a positive attitude, prepared, takes initiative, and so on, is flexible. Now, one thing that I want to share with the audience is that all four of those personality types exist within each human being. So this is my psychology hat to wearing now, meaning that all of us have all those types inside of us. For example, when the pandemic hit in March, all my speaking engagements got canceled within 1 week, everywhere. One after I got emails. Sorry, no. I was supposed to speak in Barcelona in October. I did the conference, but it was on Zoom here. Not exactly the same thing as being in Barcelona, I don't think. So did I feel like a victim? You're darn right I did. And initially I was the bystander, like, now what do I do? I don't know what to do. And have I been critical from time to time of the federal government's response to the pandemic? You're darn right I have. However, if I criticize the government for the last 6 months, it's not hurting them. It's hurting me. It's robbing me of my happiness. If I feel like a victim, be a victim. Do it for 2 hours. Feel sorry for yourself. Just like get the violins out, the orchestra, the whole thing, cry, do whatever you need to do, but then pivot and become a navigator. Meaning that I pivoted and created a book with Coach Khan. I had no plans on writing a book in 2020, honestly. But in the absence, since I can't go down this path, there was another path that opened up. So we're asking people to become navigators. If you feel like a victim or criticize or poor me, do it for a little bit, get it out of your system, feel your feelings, but don't stay stuck there. Become a navigator and live a healthy life, both mind, body, and spirit.
And it was interesting because you have this self-care, this personal health assessment, and which kind of really details where you are. And I looked at it, and it talks about like body health and emotional health and mental health and spiritual health. And I was very excited to see that. But how do you use that as a tool to figure out how to improve yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually created this personal health assessment, which is at the very beginning of the book, so people can figure out exactly where am I right now today. And there are 5 questions for each category: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And you rate yourself from 1 to 5. 5 doing I'm hitting a home run. 1 is I totally suck at it. I'm not doing anything basically. So it gives you basically, it's like looking in the mirror. If you score a 4 or 5, like either you often do it or always, man, pat yourself on the back. You're doing awesome. If you score yourself a 3 in any of those questions, it means you're doing it sometimes. There's room for improvement, but you're still doing some of it. But if you score yourself a 1 or a 2, those are big red flags. And you need to circle those and say, because those are clearly taking away from your health and your happiness. So I wouldn't ignore the 1s or 2s. Those are like red flags. And that's how I do it. That's how I coach people. So we kind of go through the assessment. We look at the 1s and 2s first. We want to move them to at least a 3, like sometimes. And I'll tell you a specific example about the physical health in terms of movement. Before the pandemic, I used to walk maybe 3 days a week, like, maybe for an hour, I get 3 miles in because I had to, because I'm getting older. But because of the pandemic and the stress that it brought to me personally, having to take care of my family, my friends, extended family, because everybody comes to me, or all my clients, my level of self-care had to increase, definitely. So since April, I've been walking every single day for an hour, every day, come rain or shine. And now it's become something that I want to do because I see the benefits: sunshine, blue skies, the vitamins, it reduces my stress levels. Sometimes I take my phone with me and talk to people, but other times I just leave my phone at home and I commune with God. I walk and I talk and I listen, and that's my connection, and it recharges me. I can't afford not to do it, and it's made a huge difference in my life. And that's a simple example. That's one question out of the 20, out of the 20 questions, right? How much do you move a day? What? Because movement is life, as you know.
And you know what, Dr. Elia, we'll find out more from you after we take this commercial break.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Happy Living here. I love good things made by good people. That's why I love Dry Farm Wines. I first met the man known as the healthiest wino on earth back in 2016. He claimed Dry Farm Wines don't cause headaches or hangovers, and that he started his company because 99% of wine consumed in the US is highly processed and loaded with nasties. Like most processed food, it's toxic. That very night, I made a big health decision. Toxic wines out, natural wines in. It's been nearly 5 years since I made the switch, and I feel great. Go to happyliving.com, select Partners in Happy, and get your first bottle of natural wine for 1 penny. And I'll donate 8% of every order placed for the entire month of March to WYTV7. So share the gift of natural wine with a friend. It'll make you both happy.
Fun. And we're back with Dr. Elia, the happiness doctor, talking about how to navigate crisis. So, Dr. Elia, what I wanted to ask you is why is resilience and flexibility so important for us? And how do
Well,
we kind of, cultivate that?
it's huge. So let me give you the example of the oak tree and the palm tree. So as you know, the oak tree is this massive, strong tree. It's been around for 100 years, right? Tall and powerful and strong. But in the peak of the storm, if there's enough saturation on the ground and enough wind, what happens to oak trees? They come crashing down on cars, people, homes, right? This is what happens to them. On the flip side, the palm tree, which is relatively thin in comparison, kind of tall, kind of cute, at the peak of the storm, and I now want you to think about the storms of life, it bends and bends. Sometimes it bends parallel to the ground. But when the storm passes, the palm tree raises up again and has survived and is actually stronger because its roots have to dig down deeper to hold on for dear life. So we're asking people to be palm trees, not oak trees. And as I've shared this message before, I've had people say, well, that's a cute story. I'll remember that's adorable. Be a palm tree. Because I tell people, be a palm tree, not an oak tree. But they've asked me, Dr. Elia, what does an oak tree sound like in human terms, when you say that? An oak tree sounds like this. Well, that's the way I've been for the last 40 years. I'm not going to change now. This is who I am. Kind of like they're stuck. And the other analogy, of course, why flexibility and adaptability is so important during a challenge or a crisis is this. Think about elite athletes, people in the basketball, football, soccer, whatever, baseball. Before the big game, they're all out there in the field for half an hour before the game starts doing what? What are they doing out there for half an hour? They're stretching. Why are these people stretching? These are the most physical specimen, like the best of the best in the world. Why do elite athletes stretch before the big game? Because if they don't, and you're a doctor, you know this, they're going to pull a hamstring or worse, right? So they need to be flexible and adaptable. Now, all of us are elite athletes in the game of life. If we're not flexible or adaptable, then and we become like the oak tree, I'm not moving, we're going to suffer and we're not going to be successful. I could have said that when everything got canceled. Well, I'm really mad that I can't travel and all that stuff. Oh, and I can stew here in my office and do nothing. No, I had to decide that you need to be flexible and look at to do something else, which is the navigator. That's why that's so important. Flexibility and adaptability are keys to successfully. We're not here to talk about just surviving crisis. I'm talking about thriving during a crisis. That's why it's important. So be a palm tree.
Are there any steps to kind of cultivate that navigator in us or that palm tree in us?
Yes, one of the things is, which is the second key to navigating a crisis, is awareness. Like, listen, to what I call, whether you call that your intuition, your inner wisdom, the Spirit of God, the Holy Ghost, that still small voice, I don't care what you call it. Listen to it, get quiet. And when whatever you hear, then act upon it. That's key. I'm a spiritual person, so I feel like for the last, 30 years of my life, I've been very connected to the Spirit. And every time I hear its voice loud and clear, every time I hear it and act upon it, it's always worked out. This is one of the very few absolutes in life. I mean, it has always worked out. On the flip side, because I'm not perfect, when I've heard the voice and the message and ignored it, I've always paid the price. Every single time. So I have learned to trust it. When I was younger, I was more curious, like, why God? Why do I need to do it this way? I don't need to know anymore. I just trust it and I act upon it. So that's how it goes. So listen to that still small voice. To me, the recipe for success in life is this: listen to that voice and act on it. Be unafraid, meaning speak your truth, especially for women. This is a speak your truth, you know, and know that God is right there beside you. And number three, do it with a heart full of love, not resentfully, not with anger, not with resentments, but do it from love. Do you understand how powerful that combination is? Think about it. Listen to the Spirit, speak your mind, and do it with a heart full of love. You know who did that? The Master, the Lord, the great example, actually. Jesus, what did he do? Was he close to the Spirit? Your daughter, he was the Spirit. Was he unafraid to speak the truth? Absolutely. But did he come from a loving place in his heart? Yes, he did. That trifecta, those three things are so powerful. And I've made a commitment for 2021 and beyond. I want to live my life exactly that way. Like every interaction I have with people, speak the truth, be inspired, obviously by the Spirit, but do it from a loving place, not from a resentful or angry place. I've already started doing that, and I'm just blowing people away from that. And I'm like, it's not me. That's the message that I got. That's how I need to live my life, and that's what I'm doing. And it's powerful.
That's a great point because I have to say, I unfortunately tend to tune the voice out too many times because I start to like logic it away. Like I rationalize, like, wait a minute, like I get this like message of something I should be doing, then I'm like, well, wait a minute, and I start analyzing it and questioning it, and then I find that those times that I do that, it doesn't work out so well. But sometimes it's scary to listen to that voice.
Okay, but what's number two? Be unafraid.
Mm.
That your intuition, your inner wisdom, the Holy Spirit would never tell you something that's bad for you. So you have to get out of your head and get into your heart and say, does this feel right? Yes, I'm a little scared, but do it anyway. That's what courage is all about. You have a message to give to the world. Stop shying away from giving that message. You have a powerful voice, Dr. Betsy. Use it and why, all the gifts that God has given us are for what? For ourselves? No, it's to benefit somebody else. So the last part of our book, both of the books actually has to do with kindness and being of service. And there's a reason why we have self-care and self-love at the beginning, first key, and kindness at the end, because you know that happy people by nature perform acts of service all the time because their batteries are full. I mean, I'm full, I'm good. On the flip side, when we perform acts of kindness and service, there's an innate reward. It makes us feel so good. So I ask the audiences throughout the world, this is how I end it. I'm like, go out and perform an act of kindness and of service. What's interesting, however, is I've gotten pushback on live television, even on live, like the Zoom calls. People have said, Dr. Elia, are you serious? I'm drowning. I'm out of work. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm stressed. And you're asking to go and help somebody else? What am I, my brother's keeper? This is a direct quote, by the way. People have looked. So you know what? I'm like, no, you're not your brother's keeper. You're your mother's keeper and your sister's keeper and your daughter's keeper and the neighbor's keeper and the homeless person down the street or someone that lives 10,000 miles away. Because if you're listening to the sound of my voice, you're better off than those people, right?
Yeah.
So all you got to do is look around. Now that takes care of 90% of the people that have pushed back. And they're like, okay, I see what you're saying. All right. They agree. There's the there's the 10% that push back again. They're like, okay, well, I see what you're saying. I guess, but I'm quarantined. I can't help anybody. So I push back. I'm like, that's not true. That's not true. Listen to the Spirit. How often do you get the prompting like, I really need to talk to Joe? or I should reach out to Dr. Betsy. You don't know why, but listen and act. It does no good for us to just hear the voice and do nothing with it. And that's why I ask people, when you get that prompting, act upon it immediately. What is the worst thing that can happen? Let's say I get a prompting to reach out to you, Dr. Betsy, in the middle of the night. The worst thing that could happen is, like, you can say, Elia, why are you calling me? That's the worst thing that could happen. But more likely than not, if that prompting comes, at least that's what's happened to me for the last 9 months, because I'm reaching out to people all over the world. Every time I get a prompting, I text or get on Zoom. They're like, it's kind of funny that you actually reached out. I'm kind of struggling. That's most likely to be the answer. And you being there for them, what a gift. And that's an act of kindness, of service. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to go anywhere. Sit in front of your computer or your phone and pick up the phone and make that call and serve somebody else in that way. Because in the end, we may not all be on the same boat, but we're all in the same storm as humanity, right? Our circumstances might be a little bit different, but we're all facing this tsunami of challenges. And it's not easy. This has been a very hard year.
This is great. So where can people find out more about you, and where can they get your book?
Both on Amazon, Seven Paths to Lasting Happiness or Seven Keys to Navigating Christ on Amazon. My website is dreliagregoris.com, and or LinkedIn. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn. So and that's what I do. And I'm so grateful that you had me on your show.
Yeah, and what kind of things can we look forward to from you in the future? Do you have any plans on what other things you're going to do to give back?
I'm really waiting for this pandemic to be over so I can travel again and speak. I've been invited to do a whole tour of all of India, like not just New Delhi, but all over India and Europe. And I love to travel, and I love to connect with people from different cultures. In the end, I believe we're all brothers and sisters. I truly believe that with all my heart, and we're all children of God. And God wants us to be happy in this lifetime, not to suffer. And there's a lot of suffering happening right now. And I have, my online programs where I talk about the challenges and how to navigate them successfully, and work-life happiness and so on. So I'm around. I do a lot of coaching, virtually now. I haven't left my office like in a month, but it's weird. I've spoken to more people in the last 12 months than I ever have in my entire life. It's
I know.
crazy.
I agree. I've had the same thing. I thought this was going to keep me from being able to reach out to people, and in fact, it's actually gotten me in front of people that I don't think I would have ever had access to or been able to talk with. So it has been wonderful.
So what does that say about crisis or challenges? That there are great opportunities that come with it. You just have to be flexible and open enough, have an open heart and an open mind to look for those opportunities, because they're all over the place. People need our help. I mean, there's no doubt about it, more so than ever before. In the modern history of mankind, people need our help, but we have the means to communicate with them, which is wonderful. And we have the technology now that you and I can do this, right? And this goes out to thousands of people. A pretty amazing thing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Elia, for taking the time out of your schedule to talk with us, because this is just amazing work that you're doing, and I'm so excited to be able to spread the word of what you're doing, and kind of help get people back into, like, let's work on becoming resilient and flexible, and the navigator. So
Thank you. It's been my honor and my pleasure. Do we have any questions, or where are we at now?
yeah, so I think we're about to wrap up, but I would
Okay.
love to, maybe we'll get you back again in the future. And I just wanted to let people know also that if you enjoyed this program, that to go to WYTV7.org, and you can check out the other programs that they have on the channel. And also, if you feel the need or feel moved to donate, know that your money that you're donating is going to helping others and also helping to support the programs on this channel. And to find out also more information about me, you can follow me on social media, or you can go to my website at drbetsygreenleaf.com. So once again, thank you so much, Dr. Elia.
Thank you.